It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. This is a special episode. It's going to be a little different, maybe a lot different from what I normally do. We're going to talk about economics, markets, coronavirus, recessions, the Federal Reserve, and how all of that may or may not affect your portfolio and what you should do with it. So let me jump to the end. So if you have attention issues and you're not going to listen to this whole show, the incredibly short answer is stay the course. Okay, there you go. There you have it. You should have a well-designed portfolio that allows you to weather tough times when the market goes down and allows you to benefit greatly when markets go up. And that's kind of one of the underlying themes of this show on an ongoing basis. So that's been covered a lot. So I'm not going to talk about how one does that today. I'm going to kind of assume that you have that good and well-designed portfolio. If you do not have a smart and well-designed and efficient portfolio, you may now see more negative effects than when you've seen when times were good. As a quick example, I have someone that I talk to, and they're going to know who they are, but I'm not going to say their name because they didn't do anything wrong per se, but they had some money at a different advisor, and that advisor was trying to goose their returns by putting them in riskier kinds of bonds. And when things go well, riskier bonds tend to pay more money than conservative bonds. So a conservative bond might make 2 or 3%. A riskier bond might make 5 or 6%. And so do you want 5 or 6 or do you want 2 or 3? And it's very easy to look at the bigger dividend payments and go for that because it's a bigger amount. And it's bonds, and bonds are safe. Bonds aren't safe. Not necessarily safe. You can get really boring, safe bonds, and I like those a lot. Well, this person, we just happened to talk yesterday, and in the last 30 days, and we're in the middle of March here, 2020, their bond portfolio is down 7%, where a bond portfolio that I would typically make might be down 1%, because I'm using bonds in the cushion for safety. So that's something that, if you aren't using Phil, if you have a portfolio, if you have bonds, take a quick look. Go to Morningstar.com, type in the bonds that you own, and see, are these bonds doing their job, which means they should not go down or not go down a whole lot when the market goes down. Because if the market goes down 20% and your bonds go down 7%, everything went down. You have nothing that went up or nothing that stayed at zero, because zero looks genius when the market falls 20%. So that's a thought on that topic. Another thing with coronavirus in general, because I've gotten several phone calls from clients and other people who are listeners. And so I figured instead of maybe having 100 different phone calls with 100 clients or so, a lot of clients do listen to this show, so I'm going to go over some of this stuff now. The coronavirus. We just had Cybabe on a show or two ago. I think maybe it was last show. I think things could get pretty bad if we take some very stringent and swift action. We could nip it in the bud and could laugh about it, and tell our kids about it in a few years about how we overreacted. But unfortunately, we're not overreacting. We're underreacting. And my wife shared with me a quote that she heard someone say, and I tried to figure out where it came from. I don't know. I would be less worried if you were more worried, was the quote. And what that means is basically when I talk to somebody and they say, oh, poo, the coronavirus is like the flu, don't worry about it. Now I'm more worried. And the more people I hear that, and I watched 10 minutes of Fox News the other day, which, yes, I took a hit for the team. I did this for you. They are still telling people it's like the flu. They interviewed a guy in a hospital. And the guy said, I got the coronavirus. It wasn't so bad. Don't worry about it. Okay, sure. Rich dude who's in the hospital and can afford to not work for a couple of weeks. You're just hanging out in the hospital while the hospital has space for you. But the coronavirus has an R naught, R with a subcase, lowercase, not lowercase. Oh my God, I can't think of the word, but a little zero behind it. That tells you the rate of spread. Without us making a lot of effort, the coronavirus is going to spread a lot. Could spread a lot. And for most people, you're just going to get sick. But you might miss work. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck, missing 2 weeks of work or 3 weeks of work and missing 3 weeks of income is a ginormous fucking problem for you. And we cannot underplay that. Other people, it's going to be just fine. But if we go the way of Italy, and every indication that I've seen suggests that we will, 11 days ago, Italy had about 1,700 cases. We now have about 1,700, 1,800, depending on the exact moment that you check. Italy is now over 15,000, and if today's numbers follow the pattern, it may be 18,000 by the time you hear this podcast. And in 11 days, that's where the United States may be. We're canceling concerts. The NBA canceled all the games. The NCAA apparently is going to play games without fans. And we're taking actions, but they're not unified. They're not organized. It's not done purposefully. Each organization is making their own choices to cancel things. The American Atheist Conference just got postponed till next year. Okay, canceled, whatever. Postponed. It's still going to be in Phoenix, but a year later. And a lot of people probably should make more effort to not go out. But when people don't go out, they don't spend, unless you're online shopping. A lot of people that are concerned that they might lose their job. And I was just this morning talking to my son. And he said that he has a lot of friends, in their mid-20s that are now not going out for a beer, that are now not eating out, that are buying rice and beans to stock up a little bit in case they get stuck at home without money so that they can eat. And they're already not spending. And if a lot of people not spend, then you can get a recession. And I've talked about this in the past, and we had the yield inversion thing a year or so ago, and there was a possibility of a recession, and it seemed to kind of go away. I now think that there is a very high probability that we will have a recession by the end of 2020. Now, the funny thing about recessions is it can only be officially declared once we have 2 quarters of negative growth. I do not know if the first quarter of 2020 will be positive or negative. I'm betting it's going to squeak out and just be barely positive. And so the second quarter and the third quarter might be negative. We might not have any negative quarters as far as the gross domestic product is concerned. That's the number I'm talking about here. But even if we do have the second and third quarter, it won't be until the middle of October before the word recession can officially be used as we're in recession. And I'm mentioning this because in the past when we've had recessions, I've heard people say, oh, I knew it. I knew we were in recession and the government hid it from me for 6 months. Okay. People have to calm the fuck down about some of this conspiracy shit. The definition of recession is 2 consecutive negative quarters of gross domestic product. So the gross domestic product did not go up during that quarter. It went down, and it did it for 2 quarters in a row. So that is the definition, the formal definition of a recession. One should not use the phrase, we are in a recession, or we had a recession until that actually occurs. So don't tell me that you knew it 6 months in advance, because technically you could be right that the gross domestic product is currently not going up but going down. But the definition of a recession is when that happens for 2 consecutive calendar quarters, 6-month time period. So no one's hiding from you when the announcements come, if they come at all, if this happens. But I think that it's likely. Another topic that is coming up is the Fed. The Federal Reserve just announced that just a couple days ago that they cut interest rates by 0.5%. But interest rates are already so low that that effect is pretty darn small, I think. But it's worth noting, and maybe they go a teeny bit lower. Maybe they go to negative interest rates. And that seems like a very bizarre thing to do, but it's not unprecedented in today's environment. Several countries around the world currently have negative interest rates for short-term loans. I don't think it's a good idea. The countries that have done that have not received the benefit that they thought they were going to get from creating negative interest rates. So I'm kind of hoping we don't go there, but it seems like the Fed is willing to do what Trump wants, also willing to do maybe what is needed, and maybe they both can be the same thing, which kind of freaks me out to actually verbalize that something that Trump wants for his own personal benefit might be for the best interest of other people. The new thing that the Fed has decided to do is make available $1.5 trillion for what is called the repo market, or basically repurchasing U.S. government treasuries. And the question has come up, and a couple people have asked me already, even though this just happened yesterday, where does that money come from? They fucking create out of thin air is where it comes from. That's not necessarily a bad thing. And I want to go over that a little bit here, because you as the listener and me as the host of this show, whatever it's worth, when times are rough, you might save some money and pull some money aside, just like my son was explaining friends of his are already doing. That's a prudent action. However, the government, in my opinion, when things are tough, should spend a little bit more money, borrow that money, and then make sure that the economy doesn't go too bad, or we have what's called a soft landing, where the recession happens, but it's not a giant downward spike, but it's a little bit smaller and it's not too bad, and then we come out of it and next year kind of thing. The problem is not everyone agrees with that philosophically, because the corollary to that is that while the government should spend more money when things are rough, maybe they should spend a little less when things are good, and or they should tax people higher when things are good so they can pay off debts from the previous times where they've had to create a soft landing and make things not so bad for everybody. But despite all of the wonderful years that we just had under Obama, and mostly because of Republicans, but some Democrats helped, and now even more specifically under Trump and the Republican-run Congress, we've given tax cuts. Deceptively perceived tax cuts to middle and low-income people, which are phasing out over the next couple of years, so you don't really get a long-term tax cut. But pretty big, significant tax cuts for the really wealthy that, again, in my opinion, don't need it. Many of them didn't ask for it. And there's even organizations now of millionaires and billionaires that are asking to be taxed more. And hopefully none of you had the knee-jerk response. If they want to be taxed more, they could always donate the money. You don't fucking get it. That whenever someone says that to me, that is a sign of grotesque incompetence on the topic. If one person just randomly gives more money to the government, they now have given more money than the people they compare themselves to, and they've fallen behind. It cannot be done on an individual basis. It has to be systemic. And matter of fact, what I would do right now, if I was in charge and considering all of these things, I would find out how to get millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of coronavirus tests out and available to the public. Create funding through the CDC or some similar organization to set up drive-through testing stations like other countries have already done. We don't have to invent the wheel. Other countries have already shown us what is doable. We need to dramatically curtail travel. And I worry that Americans aren't going to be good with that. In China, apparently, they've done that. And it's been over a month, and they cracked down, and you can't go out. You can't move. You can't leave. You can't go anywhere. You don't get to interact with other people. And there's no vectors for the virus to spread. And once you get everyone locked down, the virus can't spread. And then maybe a month or two later, everyone who's going to get it has either died or gotten better. And it's over. But that's a lot of heartburn. And I can see a lot of people in America who will never put up with that. Telling them that they can't go out. Telling someone in Texas they can't drive to Oklahoma. It's going to be hard to do. So I would do massive testing. Have it along the interstate. Have it if you want to cross state lines, if you want to go from one city to another. Testing. Required testing. Maybe not required. Maybe highly suggested. And to go along with that testing, if you test positive, you now have 2 or 3 weeks where you are not allowed to go to work or interact with people. Maybe, again, a highly suggested self-quarantine, if that can work. But to go with that, there needs to be a program that for those 3 weeks, the United States government will pay your wages to you. The company doesn't have to do it, because when a company has to pay wages and gets no work, that's bad for companies. I mean, we don't want companies to suffer either. And there's whole other problems with businesses making money off the backs of people. I'm not trying to fix that here. What I'm trying to fix is that when people are sick or infected, we need to know that they're infected, and they need to know that they can go sit this out. They need to know that they can go sit at home and they're still going to get paid just like they did before. Now, I would also have something in the law that has some kind of income limits, because a person who's making $1 million a year, you know what? You can fucking sit it out for 3 weeks and not get anything from the government. You're going to be okay. Just like the guy in that Fox News story who's sitting in the hospital, not working, not getting paid, saying, it's not so bad. Congratulations for you, dude. You have just provided perhaps a brilliant example of privilege. You cannot work for a few weeks and you're going to be just fine. I could not work for a few weeks and be just fine. But there are tens of millions, scores of millions, hundreds of millions of people in the United States that without 2 or 3 weeks of income, they have serious fucking problems. And we already have people not spending. If they then don't have income and can't pay their electric bill, or they can't pay their mortgage, you can create cascade events. That's a phrase I don't know if anyone else uses that I like to say, where one thing happens and then you can see the progression of what's going to happen next and next and next. And it's not pretty. We don't want people failing to pay their rent. We don't want people not being able to pay their utility bills. We don't want people not being able to go out and buy food. We don't want that kind of economic disruption from a systemic perspective, and we don't want that on individuals. And I don't want people making the choice, do I work and make money while sick? Because I've got to watch out for number one, that's me. And you know what? I'm young and I'm poor and fuck you all. I got to make money. And I don't know that I can blame them. Because if you're at risk of being homeless for not working for 2 or 3 weeks, you might have to do what you have to do. I don't want you to be in that situation. I want to create a system where your health is going to be okay, your financial situation is going to be okay, while we try to walk through this crisis. And that's part of the reason why I think we will have a recession. We are not reacting strongly, quickly enough with Dumb and Dumber in the White House to respond to this, to make a way for people to survive financially through this, for a way for people to survive biologically, literally, life and death through this. And it's going to cause a disruption. And I've talked on previous shows, as an example, companies will invest if taxes are high or taxes are low. they're going to invest with tariffs or without tariffs. The one thing companies do not like, and the one thing that will freeze up companies from taking action, is volatility, instability, not knowing what the world is going to be like in a few months. You don't spend $100 million in a new factory to make more product if in 6 months or a year or two when the factory is done, you're not sure you can sell the stuff that you're making. You're just not going to do it. No matter how much money the government throws at a corporation, they won't build things if they don't think they can sell them. You wouldn't either. That's a really stupid strategy. I'm going to loop back to the Fed, and hopefully most of this makes sense. And I am going forward on a lot of assumptions of your understanding, and it's a little scattershot as things come to my mind. But maybe this is some of the stuff that you're feeling or worrying about too. So I hope that this information, while sometimes a little scary, provides comfort, because now you might have a better understanding of what may happen, and you know it in advance, and it's not a big shock to you. The Fed, I'm going to go forward on a lot of assumption that you understand how it works. And that's a whole lot to assume. So if you want to know more about how the Federal Reserve is what I'm talking about, the Fed works, not the federal government, the Federal Reserve, FED, I'm going to recommend that you pause this episode and go back and listen to episode 197, where I interviewed and had on the author of the book called The Power and Independence of the Federal Reserve by Peter Conti Brown. We had a wonderful discussion about what the Fed is and how it works. So if you really just don't know what the Fed is, that's the show to go to. Pause, go listen to episode 197, and then come back. So the Federal Reserve is kind of charged with, it's quasi-independent, should be more independent than maybe it currently is, agency of the government, related to banks, owned by the banks, controlled by the banks, whatever you want to think or believe. Again, listen to episode 197. But its mission is generally considered to be a couple of things. To keep the economy in a moderate zone. We don't want things to go too slowly. We don't want things to go too quickly, because you create cycles of boom and bust. And that's very difficult for the population, for people to experience and live through and thrive. And when things are going really well, the historical phrase that has been used is the Fed comes in and takes away the punch bowl. And we're assuming that there's a whole bunch of vodka in this punch bowl, and people are getting drunk on the euphoria of success, and that can lead to problems down the road. Of course, the opposite is true, is if things are too soft, the Fed should step in and do things that kind of push the economy along and encourage the economy along. The other main mission of the Fed is to keep an eye on inflation. Inflation in a very small amount is good, but you don't want 10% inflation. You don't want your dollar to be worth 90 cents next year. That creates problems. You also don't want deflation, which kind of ironically sounds good. Prices fall. But if prices fall, it's hard for companies to make money. It's hard for business owners to make money. And it creates a whole different set of economic problems. And again, I'm not going to go into all of that now. But so you really want a little teeny bit of inflation. So the Fed is supposed to put on the brakes when things get too good. They want to make sure inflation doesn't go too high. And they want to stimulate the economy when things may look a little spooky. And things look a little spooky. The Fed has dropped 0.5% on overnight lending rate, which I'm okay. I think they probably did the right thing. They did it the wrong way. They didn't let anybody know in advance. They didn't let our economic partners around the world know, hey, this is what we're doing. And that creates that uncertainty. So it kind of felt more like a panic thing. And you don't want panic things. You don't want the government doing things that cause more concern. It was supposed to be a thing that says, hey, it's going to be all right. And now the Fed has done another thing, again, very, very quickly without much notice, because they want to seem like they're strong and are reacting smartly. And they're going to spend $1.5 trillion propping up our financial systems. And some people look at that and say, hey, if we have an extra $1.5 trillion, why don't we pay off student loans? Why don't we give some of that money to poor people? Why don't we have adequate housing? Why this? Why that? There's a lot of things that may be better than propping up a bank. And from a long-term perspective, I have to agree with those people. I think we should do more for the people that aren't doing as well. I recently saw a quote, and I don't know if I remembered exactly right, but the problem with our economy is not just that poor people don't have enough money, but the fact that rich people don't think they have enough money. And people will accuse me of wanting to redistribute wealth. Well, don't accuse me of that. I'm going to fucking tell you that's what I think we should do. Who needs $5 billion? Who needs $60 billion? When you make $10,000 a year and you can't pay your bills and now you're faced with possibly not working for 2 or 3 weeks, who's looking out for you? Nobody. And that's a terrible state. And I don't think we should be in that situation. But the money that the Fed is spending is reasonable. I hate saying that. It's reasonable because if banks can't lend money back and forth to each other, you recreate a situation that we had in 2008, where Lehman Brothers and other banks folded. And in kind of a petty, short-sighted way, that may actually feel good to some of you. And I get that. I get that. Not everybody's doing really well. But if the banks don't do well, or at least can't survive, I'm not even talking about making tons of money. I'm talking about surviving. They're going to call loans. Businesses are going to have to pay loans. Businesses shut. And you're not going to fix the systemic problems that we have in this country. You're going to make them worse. Maybe this is a little bit of a too big to fail kind of thing again, which is a reason I support breaking up our big banks. Again, a whole nother show topic. A lot of stuff goes into play here. But in the short term, the Federal Reserve is buying bonds off the market and from the U.S. Treasury Department, and they're essentially creating money. And the best article I found on this, if you want to try to understand it, because I'm sure I'm doing a shitty job explaining it, there's a website called The Week. This article came out on the 12th, yesterday, the day before I recorded this, and the title is The Fed's $1.5 trillion intervention explained. And again, it's The Week. And I'm going to go read a quote here, if this page will behave, of what they had to say, because I thought it was really insightful. And they actually stole what I was going to say at the very beginning of this episode. And so I'm going to read a quote here. It's a very short paragraph, so bear with me. Quote, basically, the Fed is offering to do a bunch of dirt cheap overnight lending to the banks through an oddball financial transaction to make sure the whole financial system has enough immediately accessible money to keep functioning smoothly. That's your short and pithy summary. But explaining it further requires a brief history lesson plus some wonkery, so buckle up. Now, end quote. Thank you. So what I was going to say is buckle the fuck up, because we're going to have some interesting times. And, it's one of those old sayings, may you be blessed to live in boring times. These are not boring times. These are interesting times, whether you like it or not. They're interesting times. And there's problems that we need to fix. And our political system doesn't always work right, but we have to keep trying to fix it. Quick side note. Again, it's my opinion, and I know not everybody's going to share it. It looks like Bernie, that the chance for him being the Democratic nominee is closing quickly. And there's a debate on Sunday, and then there's more elections on Tuesday, which include several big states, Illinois, Ohio, and Florida. Once those results are in, if they are as expected, which for the last weeks, the polling was the voting was as expected, the door for Bernie is going to be closed. All right. I like Bernie's ideas. I liked Elizabeth Warren a little bit better. Elizabeth Warren was my first choice. Bernie's going to be my second choice. But that door's closing, so we have to go with Biden. If you do not vote for Biden, you are basically voting for the status quo. Now, you might say if you vote for Biden, you're voting for the status quo. I disagree. There's a chance for some things to change with Biden and Democrats in power. Things will not change if Trump and Republicans are in power. Or at least they're not going to change in the way that you think that you might want. It's a clear clear black and white thing to me. And of course, you can disagree, but voting a third party or for some other alternate candidate or writing somebody in is basically a license to kill to Donald Trump. Okay, a sidebar there, done. So the Fed is making sure the banking system is safe and secure, and that doesn't go down the fucking toilet like in '08. But the other way we can stimulate the economy is by Congress voting to spend some money. And I am going to officially ask all of the senators and representatives who don't fucking listen to me to do the following. Immediately jack up spending on testing and finding out who has corona and figuring out ways to make this public information available, take away the secrecy and the privacy of all these meetings not being top secret. We need to know what's fucking going on. People panic when they don't know what's going on because they make shit up in their head. And a lot of conspiracy theories I see online. We need facts. All the facts. 2, spend some fucking money. It is not a crime against humanity and your fucking non-existent God to help out poor people. Matter of fact, Jesus probably said something like the least among us. I don't know, feed the poor, feed the hungry. We got to do a better fucking job at that, and we need to do it right now. And tax the rich at a higher rate. And again, it's kind of, sort of, at least for some Christians, a value, the whole rich man through the eye of the needle camel thing. You can look up the quote on your own. But we need to redistribute wealth. We need to have a system that looks out for the least among us. And I don't mean that you're less valuable, but you just haven't gotten the opportunity. You haven't gotten the money. You haven't had the lucky breaks. There needs to be a floor where people are protected. We have the fucking money in this country. So that's the other side note. Now, where all this goes as far as your portfolio. See, this is the really long answer. What to do with all this information? I am going to say, stay the course. You may end up in the next few months or the next quarter or two opening up your statement from TD Ameritrade or from some other custodian, and the numbers are going to be a lot smaller than what they were the previous quarter. Breathe. It's going to be okay. You have a well-designed portfolio. If you're in or close to retirement, hopefully that portfolio has a lot of stuff in the cushion, or at least enough in the cushion, so you don't need to sell anything on this drop. Interestingly to me, the number one action that I've seen from my clients in the last couple of days is people throwing money into their accounts. And I think that that's because they're listening. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe they heard or got this idea from somewhere else, but I think it might be because of this show and or things that I've told people as clients while we have these long talks from time to time. You buy low and you sell high. You should have been more worried when it went up 31% than you are now that it's gone down 22%, which, by the way, over the last year and a couple of months, you're probably still up. But it is looking now like, because the year before that was down, we might have a 3-year period where we're net nothing or maybe down. But before that, we had 9 years of amazing, amazing returns. And in the future, we will again have amazing returns. The stock market is not something you try. It is something you do. Do or not do, there is no try, to paraphrase a very famous poet. It is not something you experiment with. It's just something you do. If you have money, I will suggest that you add money. If you are worried and you want to sell, do not do it. Do not do it. So here's a couple possible scenarios. Let's assume for a moment that we do have a recession. The stock market is typically a leading indicator of a recession. What that means is the stock market typically goes down before the recession either starts or is declared because of the whole 6-month thing. It is seen by some people that things are getting soft. And it doesn't mean that the smart people are getting out. It doesn't even mean that a lot of people are getting out. But if more people are selling than buying, it creates downward pressure on stocks. When more people are buying than selling, it creates upward pressure on stocks. So it could be just 5 or 6% or 10% of people are more likely to sell than buy, and prices can fall a whole lot. They're already down as of the close of 3/12, about 22%. And the market today, I don't even know what the market has done today. Here it is. Let me see. I'm going to update this number. Not that it matters, but I'm here. I'm looking at it. I'll refresh any second here. Good quality radio here, waiting for a page to refresh. My apologies for that. Up about 2.5%, but it may end up neutral, flat for today. It may end up down. I don't know. And I don't know what's going to happen next. And it could be that the market has already baked into the expectations of what this future theoretical recession is going to cause. And that is a drop of 22%. So it could be a situation where if you took all your money out now, this is the bottom. And then it starts to go up and you're sitting on your hands. You're sitting in a big pile of cash. And now you've made your losses permanent because now you're not invested when the market goes up. So that's one problem. The second problem is you could take out your money now that you've had a 22% loss, at least on the stocks, and the market goes down another 20%. And you might be able to tell yourself, yeah, it's a pretty fucking smart move. Good job. You dodged a 20% drop on all your stock holdings. Congratulations. But then the market starts to go up. And sometimes when the stock market hits bottom, it starts to go up swiftly. And in a week or two, it recovers 15, 18, 20%. And you're still sitting on the cash going, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Now, do you know that that's the bottom now because it's gone up 15%? Because when it's going down, you never know when the bottom is. I mean, maybe you can make an educated guess and get lucky sometimes, but the data says most people don't. You can't do it. So when do you buy back in? If it suddenly pops 10 or 15 or 20%, you may end up buying back in right here at the point that you sold out. So you not only have to be right in knowing when to sell, you have to be right knowing when to buy. And of course, if you're in a taxable account, you may have created a great big tax bill for yourself because the previous 11 years, the market's been up a lot. So you've made a lot of money. You pull it all out, put it in cash. You have a ginormous tax bill. So even if you are right and you got out at the right time and you're kind of sort of right and you got back in before it came back up to where it is now, the net difference could be small enough that the tax bill that you have to pay is bigger than you even being right. So relax. We don't know what the market is going to do today. We don't know what it's going to do tomorrow. And I think one of the biggest strengths that I have over almost every person I hear in the media talking about the stock market is that I will acknowledge that I have no fucking clue what it's going to do. I don't. Not in the short run. But in the long run, I'm very confident. Someone accused me of predicting that the market always goes up, and I got a little defensive. And then I realized that that's true in the long run. In the short run, I clearly acknowledge over and over again, I have no idea. And I don't make predictions about what it's going to do in the short run. But I do make predictions, and I do stand by my position that in the long run, it's going to go up. If you are young or even 15 years away from retirement, but you don't consider yourself young, and you should, because that means you're only probably 50 or in your 40s, a big stock market drop might be the best thing that ever happened to you. It's not even bad. Because if the market falls by half, you keep piling money in, you're buying on sale. If you're closer to retirement, fingers crossed you had a good portfolio and things are working out well for you and you can wait for it to come back up. Probably getting to the point where I'm repeating myself now, but I think I've covered everything that I want to. Travel as little as you can because of the coronavirus. Look out for friends and family. If you know someone that's older, check on them. Look out for other human beings. We're all important. Make sure they're safe. And you, I think you, because I feel this way, you have a moral obligation to not get infected because you could spread it to people that aren't as healthy as you. Don't be a self-serving fucker because you're 25 and in perfect health and get sick and laugh it off and then spread it to other people. Don't be that asshole. Don't panic, I guess. Don't worry about, well, you're going to worry about your portfolio when you open up that document and it's lower. Because I know I've been doing this for 23, 24 years. When 2008 hit and I opened up my statements and I saw how much money I lost, it's upsetting. It's okay. Own it, but don't overreact. I still think at this point, or if it goes dramatically lower, one of the best things you can do is try to figure out how to add more money if you have it. If you don't have any money, you don't have any money, and it doesn't apply. Try to be careful if your job is at risk, and until Congress gets their shit together and decides to help you out, protect yourself. Make sure you have a little bit of cash extra if you can. Try to make sure there's some food around so you don't have to go out. And you don't have to buy 5,000 rolls of toilet paper. I mean, how much toilet paper do you need for 2 or 3 weeks? Think about it. You could still go to a store, but don't linger. Just go. You can call and have them pick the stuff, and you drive up in your car and they load it in the car, and you don't talk to that person. You don't interact with the person. You open the trunk and they put it in. Or you open the trunk and you put it in, but you stay away from them, a couple of meters. There's things that you can do. So be careful with the coronavirus. It could get really weird going forward. I mean, so many things are being canceled already, and I think it's going to get worse. I think it's now likely that we're going to have a recession. And what can you do with all this? In summary, again, with your portfolio, not a whole lot, because I don't know how it's going to affect things. But be smart, be careful, take care of those around you. Hopefully this gave you a lot of information and provides you a teeny little bit of comfort that it's going to be okay. If you have specific questions or want to talk, you can email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. If I get a big spike in phone calls, it will be very hard for me to respond to everybody. I've gotten busy enough that that's become a potential problem for me, but I do want to be there for you. I might call you instead of leisurely talking for an hour like I used to do. It might be 15 minutes or something, but I'll try to help everyone that has questions. I'm going to wrap up, and this is all there is. This is the beginning, the middle, and the end of the show. I'm not even going to put an annoying Christmas or annoying Christian song afterwards. We're just going to have the exit music, and I thank you for listening. And I like to say that I was going to see you at the American Atheist Conference, but I'm not. I'm glad I got my Austin trip in before that. The ACA has now restricted access to their building. Just hunker down. Hopefully it's a few weeks or a few months, and it doesn't get worse than that, and people come to their senses, and we do what is necessary. And I will talk to you soon. Ciao.